The alarm clock had been broken for 2 weeks. Marisol Tremaine still woke at 5:42. Her body knew the hour, the way it knew the divorce papers folded in the drawer beneath the silverware. Some things you learned once, and your bones remembered. She lay in the dark and listened. The refrigerator hummed. A garbage truck dragged its slow song down a side street 2 blocks over. She got out of bed. The bathroom mirror was an enemy on Mondays. The face was 38. The face had been 38 for what felt like a long time. In the kitchen, instant coffee in a chipped mug. On the table, 2 things. A glass jar with a label in her own handwriting, Mateo School. 3/4 full of singles and quarters and 1 folded 10 near the top. Her younger brother was a community college sophomore in San Bernardino. He was going to be a respiratory therapist. He was going to do for someone else's mother what no one had been able to do for theirs. She sent him $300 a month, $400 when she could stretch. The jar was how she stretched, and a small leather notebook, worn at the corners. She had bought it 22 months ago. On the afternoon, her supervisor had told her, with a small smile that lived under her skin to this day, that the clients on the upper floors preferred a certain look. He had used those words on purpose. He had wanted her to ask what he meant. She had not asked. That night she had bought the notebook. She had written down the date, the time, the exact words, the smile. Every entry since then was a fact, not a feeling, not a complaint. A fact. The way someone in a country that did not believe its women might still write down what had happened, in case the air shifted, in case a door opened, in case anyone ever was willing to read. She opened it. She wrote 3 lines. Monday morning, new assignment list posted, pulled off the production assistant rotation again. Reason given, image fit. Today will be a hard one. She closed the notebook and slid it into her bag, the navy blazer. $22 4 years ago off a clearance rack on Pico. The collar was starting to fray. She had pressed it the night before. She made sure to look respectable. It was the part she controlled. The bus was crowded. She found a seat near the back and watched Echo Park slide into Silver Lake. A woman 2 rows up was crying very quietly into her phone, saying, "I know, I know, I know." Marisol's mind drifted to the previous Saturday. She had been at Beacon and Bean, the small coffee shop 2 blocks from her building. She had been there every Saturday morning for almost 3 years, working on the same screenplay. A small story about her mother, about a woman who had raised 2 children alone in a city that never quite saw her. A man had come in. Older than her, salt and pepper beard, faded canvas jacket, a backpack over one shoulder. The kind of man who looked like he might have come down from one of the canyon trails. Sunglasses pushed up into his hair. 20 minutes in, his elbow had clipped her table. Her coffee had tipped. He had apologized the way some people apologize, which is to say, like the words were a thing he believed in, not a sound he made out of habit. He had bought her a new coffee. He had asked, with a small gesture toward her laptop, if she was a writer. She had said she was trying to be. He had asked what she was writing about. She had told him a few sentences. He had not interrupted. When she finished, he had said something that had stayed in her chest all week. The hardest stories to write are the ones that are true. People will tell you to make it bigger. Don't. The smallness is what makes it real. She had blinked at him. She had told him her name when he asked. He had not given his in return. He had taken his book and his backpack and walked out. She had sat there for a long time after he was gone. There had been something about him. The voice. The way he had held his coffee with both hands. A small ringing in the back of her mind that she had pushed away. She had thought, no, of course not. People like that did not sit alone in small coffee shops on Saturday mornings. She had thought, that's my whole problem. I see things that aren't there. The bus jolted stop. She straightened her blazer and stepped down onto Wilshire Boulevard. Arch Rey Productions stood on the corner. 18 floors of glass and limestone. The lobby had famous chandelier. The marble floor reflected it in slow, broken light. The air smelled of lilies. There were always lilies. 3 months ago, something had begun to shift. A new partner had come on, an independent production company. $45 million over 3 pictures. A seat on the board. No one in the building had actually met them. Today, the rumor said, that was going to change. Marisol had stopped caring about partners years ago. Partners came and went. The chandelier stayed. The lilies stayed. Brennan Holcomb stayed. What no one in the building knew, because Brennan had taken pains for them not to know, was that the year had been a hard one for him in ways that had nothing to do with Arch Reverie. His wife had moved out in February. His older daughter had stopped returning his calls in April. The previous board chair had pulled him aside in May and said, in the kind of low voice executives used when they wanted plausible deniability, that the numbers had to keep going up, no matter what, because the new partner was coming, and the new partner was going to want to see results. Brennan had heard in that conversation a man asking him to do whatever it took. He had also heard, underneath, a man telling him that if it went wrong, it was going to be Brennan's fault, not the board's. He had not told anyone. He had just gone back to work. He had cut the benefits package. He had moved the lighting and grip teams onto contract. He had closed complaints without reading them. He had told himself every morning that this was the job. None of that excused what was about to happen. He did not yet know what was about to happen. He only knew that he had a knot in his stomach the size of a fist, and that he had been pacing his office since 7. Marisol pushed through the revolving door at 8:27. She walked along the side corridor that ran past the staff meeting room. The door was open just enough. She slowed. Brennan's voice. She knew it the way a person living near tracks knows the 11 o'clock train. Whitfield, executive floor. Bring whoever you need. Yes, Mr. Holcomb. Lansing, front desk all day with Ashby. Anyone goes near the elevators without an appointment, you stop them. Understood. Rise, basement on lighting prep. Stay there. I don't want to see you on the upper floors today. A pause. Then a man's voice, level and even. Yes, Mr. Holcomb and Tremaine. Marisol stopped breathing. Costume storage. Basement 2. All day. She knows. A pause. The word fell with the weight of a stone dropped into a deep well. Move. Chairs scraped. Marisol slipped past the door before the meeting let out. Her hand was not quite steady on the stairwell handle. 10 minutes later, she came back up to the lobby to drop off a delivery form. Behind the front desk stood Terrance Ashby, 24, 14 months on the job. The kind of face that made guests feel welcome and supervisors decide, on bad days, that he was the cheapest person in the room to take it out on. He gave her a small nod. He leaned across the counter. Mari, heads up. 11:30, the new partner. Brennan's been pacing since 7. I noticed. I just walked past the briefing. He winced. How bad? System storage, all day. He said it twice. Terrance breathed out slowly. He looked at her for a moment longer. Something passed behind his face that she had seen before. Something he had been carrying for 14 months. Mari, listen, I've been meaning to say, don't, Terry. Just one thing. I should have. Don't. Not today. He nodded once. She put the form on the counter, gave him a tired smile, and walked back toward the stairwell. She did not see him press his hands flat against the counter after she was gone. She did not see him close his eyes. What she also did not see, and what no one in the building knew, was that 2 weeks earlier Terrance had sat down at his kitchen table in a small studio apartment in Koreatown on a Sunday night when he could not sleep, and had written out in a careful blocky hand every incident he had ever witnessed Brennan Holcomb commit against an employee in the lobby of Arch Reverie. He had not signed it. He had folded a copy of a screenplay into the envelope, a screenplay he had once found on the printer when Marisol had forgotten to pick it up, and had taken home and read in a single night, and had kept ever since because he had not known what else to do with how good it was. He had mailed it to Lantern Road Pictures, the new partner whose name he had seen on an internal memo he had not been supposed to see. He had walked the letter to a mailbox 3 blocks from his apartment, so the building's mailroom would not catch it. He had wondered every day since whether anyone had read it. He had not told Marisol. He had not told anyone. The basement was quiet. The fluorescent tubes hummed. Marisol lifted velvet dresses off a long rack and folded them onto a sorting table. The costumes were for a period drama. She did not know the production company. Just before 10, Joaquin Reyes appeared in the doorway. He was a wiry man in his mid-50s. 12 years on the lighting crew. He had buried his wife the previous spring. He carried a clipboard the way some people carried a wedding ring. Mari, Jokin, Brennan said you were supposed to stay on lighting prep. I am on lighting prep. He patted the clipboard. I needed a gel filter from the bottom rack. Took the long way. He came over. He didn't waste words. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table, no bigger than a matchbook. Don't open it here. Read it later. Somewhere with a door. Jokin, what is? Just keep your head up today. Something is going to happen. I don't know exactly what, but something. Good or bad? He thought about it. Both, probably. The two come together more often than people think. She slipped the paper into her bag. He picked up the clipboard, gave her a nod, and was gone. She read it an hour later, in the small windowless office at the end of the hall. One line in a careful, blocky hand. Today there will be a change. Hold steady. No signature. No explanation. She folded it back into the middle of her notebook. It sat warm against her ribs all the way down the corridor. At 11 minutes past 11, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb in front of Arch Rey Productions. The man who got out paid the driver and stood for a moment, looking up at the building. He wore a faded canvas jacket over a dark shirt, soft worn jeans, scuffed boots, a small backpack over one shoulder, sunglasses pushed into his hair. He had a meeting upstairs at 11:30. He had decided to arrive 30 minutes early, in a faded jacket, with a backpack. He had read the two anonymous letters again that morning, sitting at the small wooden table in his kitchen up in the canyon. The first had arrived 2 months ago. The second one, 3 weeks later, had been different, longer, more careful, almost a kind of ledger. It had come with a screenplay folded inside the envelope. He had read the screenplay in a single sitting, then again. He had not been able to stop thinking about the woman who had written it. He walked toward the revolving door. The doorman stepped forward. Dalton Crowley, 3 years on the job. He understood, without being told, what kind of person belonged inside the front doors of Arch Rey, and what kind did not. The man in the canvas jacket was not. Private property. Do you have an appointment? I have a meeting with the board at 11:30. Dalton looked him up and down. He smiled the small, tight smile of a man who knew a joke when he heard one. With the board, he repeated. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move along. I can wait inside if that's easier. It's not easier. All right. The man nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He took 2 steps backward, turned, and walked over to the low stone planter at the edge of the building's facade. He sat down on it, set his backpack at his feet, and looked through the glass into the lobby. Brennan Holcomb stepped off the executive elevator at 11:16. He surveyed the lobby with the small, critical sweep of a man who had been told that the best managers spotted problems before anyone else did. The lilies were good, the chandelier was good. Then he saw a woman in a navy blazer walking across his lobby with a stack of papers in her arms. His face changed. Marisol had not wanted to be there. Director Caldwell had phoned the basement office 15 minutes earlier, asking for the script binder before his 11:30 production meeting. He had used the word now. She had carried the binder up the back stairs and crossed the marble floor, and was halfway across, when she glanced through the tall glass front of the building. She slowed. There was something about the man on the planter, the shoulders, the way he held himself. No, not him, not here, not possible. She started to lift her hand. Tremaine. The voice landed across the lobby like a blade dropped flat on a counter. Brennan was already walking toward her, his shoes clicking on the marble. Tremaine, what are you doing on this floor? Mr. Holcomb, Director Caldwell asked me to bring this binder to the second-floor conference room. He needs it before his 11:30. Caldwell. Yes, sir. He called the basement office 15 minutes ago. And there was no one else in the entire building who could carry a binder up 2 flights of stairs. I was the one in the office when he called. He stopped a few feet from her. Do you know what's happening in this building today, Tremaine? Yes, sir. The board's strategic partner is coming in. The new partner. The one who has the 18th floor sitting on a knife's edge. And I have been clear about who is on which floor and at which time today. Yes, sir. And yet here you are, crossing the main lobby. On the morning we are walking the building. It's just to drop off the binder. I'm on my way back down right now. Caldwell. He let the name sit. Do you remember why we had a conversation about this 2 months ago? Mr. Holcomb. Image fit. Those were the words. You were very upset at the time. She didn't answer. I gave you a chance after that conversation. 2 months on the rotation. And what happened? 3 complaints from the team leads. 3. I have never been late on a turnaround. I have the emails too. Did I ask you a question, Tremaine? She closed her mouth. No, I didn't. You can leave the binder at the front desk. Ashby will run it up to Caldwell. Are we clear? Yes, sir. He looked at the stack of papers in her arms. He looked at her face, and then he did something she had not expected. He reached out and took the binder from her. Not gently, not roughly, but with the casual entitlement of a man taking back something he had decided belonged to him. And he opened his hand and let it fall. The binder hit the marble with a flat, ugly sound. The pages came loose and scattered. Several came to rest at Brennan's polished shoes. "Pick them up," he said. "Right now, this is what you are actually good at." Marisol did not move. The lobby held its breath. Terrance had gone still behind the desk. The two executives waiting for the elevator had stopped looking at their phones. The young woman from marketing who had been carrying 2 coffees had set them down on a side table. Outside on the stone planter, the man in the canvas jacket had not moved either. He was watching through the glass. His face was very calm. But his jaw had tightened, and the knuckles of his right hand had gone white where they pressed against the denim. Marisol bent down, slowly. She did not kneel. She bent at the waist, her blazer pulling tight across her shoulders, and she began to gather the papers into her arms. She kept her eyes on the floor. She was afraid of what would happen to her face if she looked up. She heard footsteps cross the marble. "Let me help." She looked up. Terrance had stepped out from behind the front desk. He stopped beside her and bent down just as she had and began picking up papers from the floor. Brennan's head turned. "Ashby." Terrance did not answer. "Ashby, get back to that desk." Terrance picked up another piece of paper. His hands were not entirely steady, but they were not stopping either. "Ashby, I am speaking to you." Terrance straightened. He did not look at Brennan at first. He looked at Marisol. Something moved across his face that had been waiting to move for a long time. Then he turned his head and met Brennan's eyes. "No, sir." His voice was soft. It did not waver. "Not today." Brennan stared. There was a long, dangerous silence. Brennan's mouth opened slightly. He glanced toward the front desk, toward the executives, toward the woman with the 2 coffees. He was, for the first time, aware of how many people were watching. He drew a breath to speak, but across the lobby, through the glass front of the building, something moved. The man in the canvas jacket had stood up. He lifted the backpack onto his shoulder. He was walking toward the revolving door. He did not look in a hurry. He looked like a man who had simply decided that the time for sitting outside had ended. He pushed through the door, stepped onto the marble, and reached up to slide his sunglasses off his face. He folded them and slipped them into the inside pocket of his jacket. He walked across the lobby toward the 2 people on the floor. Brennan saw him coming. "Sir, excuse me," I told the doorman. "This is a private." The man did not stop. He passed Brennan without looking at him. He walked all the way to the small pile of papers and the 2 people gathering them, and he lowered himself down onto one knee beside them, and he reached out and picked up a piece of paper. He smiled, just a little, at no one in particular. "These pages are heavier than they look," he said quietly. "Must be the good paper." Marisol's hands stopped moving. She turned her head slowly. He was right next to her. No sunglasses, no cap, just the face. The salt and pepper beard. The quiet, steady eyes. The same face that had sat at the next table at Beacon and Bean 3 days earlier. Her breath caught. It's you," she whispered. "From the coffee shop." He looked at her. The smile widened, just a fraction. Something in his eyes was warm and also somehow very sorry. "It's good to see you again, Marisol. This time I'll try not to spill anything on you." He gathered the last of the pages. He stood up and held out a hand to her. After a moment, she took it. He helped her to her feet without effort. He placed the stack of papers carefully into her arms. "Take these to Director Caldwell. He's expecting them. I'll speak with Mr. Holcomb." "I don't understand," she said. "I know. It's all right. Go ahead. We'll talk after." She nodded slowly. She held the binder against her chest, took 2 steps backward, and turned and walked toward the conference corridor. Terrance hesitated. He gave the man a single, almost imperceptible nod and walked back to the front desk. He stood behind the counter with his hands resting flat on it, as if he were holding the edge of a small boat steady in a current. Brennan had been standing in the same spot for the better part of a minute. "All right." His voice was lower now, harder. "I don't know who you are. I don't know how you got past my doorman. But you are going to turn around and walk back out of this building, or I am going to call the police." The man in the canvas jacket did not turn around. He stood very still, looking at Brennan with an expression that was patient and even and without anger. "Mr. Holcomb, don't Mr. Holcomb me. Who are you? My name will come up in a minute. Before it does, I want to be sure we both saw the same thing just now. What I saw is a woman out of position on a major board day and a manager doing his job. That's what I saw. You knocked her binder out of her hands. You told her to pick it up because it was what she was good at. I dropped it. I had a long morning. You told her in front of every person in this lobby. I don't have to explain my management style to a stranger." "You don't," the man agreed, "but you might want to. Who are you?" The man reached into the inside pocket of his canvas jacket. He took out a phone. He pressed a single button, lifted it to his ear, and said quietly, "I'm in the lobby. We're ready." He slid the phone back into his pocket. "It means a colleague of mine is going to walk through that door in about 30 seconds. "A colleague from where?" "From the company that holds the strategic partnership with Arch Rey." The silence in the lobby changed shape. Brennan glanced at the front entrance, back at the man. "Listen to me. Whatever you think you saw, what actually happened was that a manager corrected an out-of-position employee on the morning of a major board visit. That's the whole story. And when your colleague walks in here, she's going to hear my side first, because this is my building." "It isn't. Excuse me, it isn't your building." The revolving door turned. A man in his early 40s stepped into the lobby, dark suit, a slim leather portfolio under one arm. He paused, took in the scene, and walked across the marble. "Sorry I'm a minute behind. Traffic on Wilshire." "You're fine." Brennan's chest had gone tight. He had been expecting a woman. He pulled himself up, straightened his tie, and stepped forward. "You must be from the partner's office." "Brennan Holcomb, Executive Operations Manager. I want to apologize for whatever you may have walked into. There's been a small misunderstanding here, but The man with the portfolio looked at Brennan's hand, looked at his face, did not take the hand. "My name is Holloway. I'm the head of corporate security for Lantern Road Pictures." Brennan blinked. "Security?" "Yes, sir. I thought—" He stopped. "I thought the partner was sending a representative." They did. "Then where?" Holloway turned very slightly toward the man in the canvas jacket. He did not look at him with deference. He looked at him with the easy attentiveness of someone who had been working with him for a long time. "Mr. Reeves, the materials you asked for." He held the portfolio out. The man in the canvas jacket took it with a quiet word of thanks. The lobby very quietly came apart. Terrance's hand slipped off the counter. Somewhere in the conference corridor, Marisol Tremaine had stopped walking. She had turned her head when she heard the name, Mr. Reeves. She had heard a voice in a coffee shop once tell her that the hardest stories to write were the ones that were true. She had told herself on Saturday night, in the small lamplight of her kitchen, that the face she had been sitting next to could not have been the face she thought it might have been. She had been entirely wrong. Brennan had gone the kind of gray that came into a man's skin when his body had understood something his mind was still refusing. "You are." The man in the canvas jacket turned to face him fully for the first time. He did not look angry. He looked tired. "My name is Keanu Reeves. I'm one of the founding partners of Lantern Road Pictures. 3 months ago, my company entered into a strategic production partnership with Arch Rey. $45 million over 3 pictures, a seat on the board, authority over personnel decisions at the executive level." He paused. "Over the last 2 months, our office received 2 anonymous letters from people who work in this building. They described patterns that concerned me. I came in early today because I wanted to see the lobby of this company before I sat down at a table with the people who run it." Brennan's hand had risen halfway in some involuntary gesture. He let it drop. "What I saw," Keanu went on, evenly, "was a doorman tell a stranger to move along because of how he was dressed. I saw a manager humiliate a woman in front of half her colleagues. I saw a front desk associate come out from behind his counter to do what was right without knowing anyone was watching." His voice didn't rise. "That is what I saw, Mr. Holcomb." Brennan tried to speak. Nothing came out then. "This is a setup. You came in dressed like that on purpose. You wanted this to happen. Mr. Holcomb, I made no decisions for you this morning. Every decision you made was your own." Brennan stared. His mouth moved soundlessly for a moment. "All right." His voice was scraping up from somewhere underneath. "Let me say something before any of you upstairs make any decisions. I have run this property for 5 years. I brought revenue up 22% in the last fiscal year alone. I have done the work. The previous chair told me, sitting in his office, that the numbers had to keep going up. He told me I would be the one held responsible if they didn't, so I did what he asked me to do. There was a small, dangerous silence. I know you did, Keanu said. Brennan's head jerked up. He had expected resistance, not agreement. I have read the financials. I have also read what you did to get them. What I did. You cut the support staff benefits package 18 months ago. You moved your lighting and grip teams onto a contract structure that pays well under the regional standard. You closed 4 staff complaints over the last 22 months without interviewing the people named in any of them. He paused. The previous chair asked you for a number, Mr. Holcomb. He did not ask you to humiliate Marisol Tremaine in this lobby. He did not ask you to take a young front desk associate and make him afraid to speak in his own building. Those things you chose. The number was the assignment. The cost was the choice. Brennan's mouth had gone dry. He turned, half a step, toward the small crowd at the edges of the lobby. He looked at them the way a man looks at a jury he is no longer sure of. I built this, whatever any of you think of me. I built this. None of you would have a job this morning if I had not. You did not give us anything, Mr. Holcomb. The voice came from the side corridor. Joaquin Reyes had come up from the basement a few minutes earlier to deliver a gel filter to the second-floor lighting prep room. He had stepped out of the back stairwell, caught the strangeness in the air, and stayed where he was. He stood now at the edge of the lobby, clipboard tucked under one arm, looking at Brennan without anger, without satisfaction. We worked here for years before you came. We will be here after you leave. You did not give us our jobs. We did our jobs. That is a different thing. Brennan stared at him. Jokin, that is a different thing, Mr. Holcomb. A small sound came from the front desk. It was Terrance very softly. Yes. The young woman from marketing did not say anything. She looked at Brennan and did not look away. Brennan turned back to Keanu. He drew himself up one last time. What are you proposing, Mr. Reeves? Keanu nodded once to Holloway. Holloway drew a single sheet of paper from inside his suit jacket. He held it out to Brennan. This is a notice of administrative suspension, effective immediately, signed by Mr. Reeves in his capacity as a member of the Arch Rey board, under authority granted by the partnership agreement and ratified by the full board 2 months ago. You are not to enter this building, contact members of staff, or speak on behalf of Arch Rey until the full board meets within 48 hours. I'll accompany you to your office. 30 minutes for personal items. Brennan did not take the paper. You can't do this in a single morning. I am not doing it in a single morning. The board has had this authorization in place for 2 months. What changed this morning is that I saw, with my own eyes, what we had been hearing about in letters. Brennan took the paper slowly, in 2 fingers. He looked down at it. Brennan A. Holcomb. Notice of administrative suspension, but Keanu had not finished. He turned to look down the conference corridor, where Marisol had come back without anyone noticing. The binder was once again pressed tight against her chest. Marisol, will you come over here for a moment, please? She came. She walked across the marble the way someone walks through a dream. He unzipped the leather portfolio Holloway had brought. He drew out a thin manila folder. He held it out. She did not take it. She stared at the cover page. It was a printed copy of her screenplay. The title page was creased. The margins were marked with handwritten notes in pencil. A screenplay by Marisol Tremaine. She had typed those words herself more times than she could count, on a laptop balanced on her knees in a 1-bedroom apartment in Echo Park. She had never quite believed any of them. I read this twice, Keanu said quietly, once in a single sitting, then again more slowly. There are notes in the margins. I have a habit of writing in margins. Lantern Road Pictures would like to produce it. I would like to produce it. If you are willing to work with us, we can begin that conversation whenever you are ready. Marisol did not move. A tear had broken loose and was sliding down her cheek. She did not bother to wipe it. She lifted one hand slowly and touched the corner of the page as if to be sure it was real. You read it twice. How did you? It came folded inside one of the letters our office received, he said. I won't ask who sent it. They sent it because they thought it should be read. They were right. He did not look at Terrance when he said it. But Terrance's hands, flat on the counter, did not stop shaking for a long time. Marisol took the folder, finally with both hands, and held it against her chest on top of the binder. 2 stacks of paper now, pressed against her heart. Brennan had been standing very still through all of it. He looked at Marisol, at the folder, at her face. For a moment there was, in the space of that pause, a small irrational hope in several people's chests that he was going to say he was sorry. He did not. He looked at her notebook instead, the leather corner of which had slipped out of her bag during the gathering of papers. That notebook. His voice was for her alone, but the lobby was so still that the words carried. How long? 22 months. He let out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it had had any warmth in it. 22 months. You ended a 20-year career with a notebook. She looked at him for a long second. Then she reached down slowly and pulled the notebook out of her bag. She held it in both hands. Mr. Holcomb, I didn't end your career. I wrote down what happened. You wrote this story. I just held the pen. He stared. She did not say anything else. After a long moment, he turned and walked the rest of the way to the elevators, Holloway behind him. The doors opened. They stepped inside. The doors closed, the lobby exhaled. 48 hours later, the Arch Rey board met. They reviewed the documentation. They voted unanimously to end Brennan Holcomb's employment, effective the date of the lobby incident, with cause. The story did not appear on the internet. 4 phones had been held up at various points in the lobby. Keanu had asked gently that the footage be kept private. He did not want a viral moment. He did not want a man's face on a meme. He wanted, in his own quiet words, a change, not a circus. Every phone owner agreed. What went out into the world instead was a press release, a workplace fund, mandatory training, a flatter management structure, an anonymous complaint line run by an independent third party, a pay equity audit, an elected representative from each department invited to attend executive meetings. The fund had a name, the Beacon Initiative. $750,000, jointly underwritten by Lantern Road and Arch Rey, set aside for backstage staff, custodians, security personnel, and support workers who wanted to pursue a trade certificate or a community college degree. The name came from a small coffee shop in Echo Park. The board had wanted to name it after Mr. Reeves. He had declined. 1 week after the board vote, Keanu Reeves stood at the front of the company's largest screening room. He did not stand on the stage. He stood in front of it on the carpet, same canvas jacket, same jeans, same boots. I want to say 3 things. I will try to be brief. He looked at the room. Dignity does not have to be expensive. It only has to be real. There is no item on this company's budget that buys it. It is the baseline, and from now on it is going to be treated that way. He paused. Silence does not protect anyone. I know there are people in this room who have been carrying small wounds for a long time without saying them out loud, because the cost of saying them has seemed higher than the cost of swallowing them. Starting today, we are building a place where the cost runs the other way. He looked at the back of the room. Marisol was standing there with Joaquin beside her. Terrance was 3 rows up. He held all 3 of them in his eyes for a moment. There is no one in this building who is more important than anyone else in this building. A film is not the name of its director. It is the work of every person whose name does not fit on the poster. The person at the front desk at 6 in the morning. The custodian who closes the building at 11 at night. The assistant who carries the binder up 2 flights of stairs because a director needs it for his 11:30. If anyone in this building has ever made any of you feel smaller than that, the fault was never yours. And from today, we start again. He stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. Then in the back of the room, someone began to clap. A single pair of hands. Then another. Then the row beside them. Then it moved like a slow wave through the room until every person in the screening room was standing. Keanu Reeves did not bow. He did not raise his hands. He let the moment belong to the people it actually belonged to. When the clapping faded, he picked up the backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and walked out the side door. He took the stairs. 6 months passed. A Thursday evening in Van Nuys, late October. The sun was already gone behind the row of palms that lined the strip mall across the street. The apartment was on the ground floor of a 4-unit building with a cracked walkway and a porch light that flickered. Brennan Holcomb sat at the small folding table he used as a desk, eating dinner out of a plastic container. The container was from the deli down the block. Cold rotisserie chicken and a side of macaroni salad. He ate slowly with a plastic fork, looking at nothing in particular. The civil suit had settled in August. 9 plaintiffs. $2.4 million, a significant portion personally his. He had sold the Porsche in July. He had sold the Swiss watch in September to a man on Ventura Boulevard who had paid him about a third of what it was worth and had asked no questions. The condominium in Beverly Hills was on the market. Until it sold, the mortgage was coming out of money he no longer had. He worked now at a small logistics company off Sherman Way. Overnight freight for grocery distributors. The office was a converted Quonset hut behind a chain-link fence. His title was Operations Coordinator. His salary was $61,000 a year. On his second day at the job, a man named Hector who ran the loading dock had asked him on a smoke break what he had done before. Brennan had said operations in a different industry. Hector had nodded and not asked again. He had not been asked again since. On his phone, on the corner of the table, a text message sat unanswered from his older daughter. It had come in 2 days ago. It said only, "I heard you're in Van Nuys now." He had not yet written back. He had started a reply 3 times. Each time he had erased it. He set down his fork. He looked at the message again. He picked up the phone. He looked at the cursor blinking at the bottom of the screen. He set the phone back down. He went to the kitchen and washed his plastic fork in the sink, even though it was a plastic fork, and put it in the drying rack. Then he came back and finished his dinner. Dalton Crowley was still working the front entrance of Arch Rey. This had been, in the weeks immediately after the lobby incident, the most controversial decision Keanu had made. Several members of the staff had argued, openly and respectfully, that Dalton should be let go. Keanu had listened. He had agreed with most of it. He had still asked the board to keep Dalton on, under a condition. A 3-month workplace dignity program, structured conversations with employees he had affected, monthly performance reviews. He had said it once, in a meeting, without raising his voice. If we do not give people the chance to learn from a wrong they have done, we are telling the next generation that mistakes are permanent. I do not believe that. 6 months later, Dalton greeted every visitor with the same calm courtesy, regardless of how they were dressed. He had introduced one small change to the morning routine, with management's permission. Whenever a delivery worker came through the lobby on a long shift, Dalton offered them a paper cup of water from a small dispenser he had installed at the side of the desk. He had paid for the dispenser himself. He had not spoken to anyone in the building about why. He did not have to. Terrance Ashby finished the leadership development program at the top of his cohort. He was now an assistant production coordinator. On his first morning in the new role, he had walked past the front desk where he had worked for 14 months. The young woman now sitting behind the counter was new. He had stopped, leaned slightly across the counter, the way he had once leaned across that counter to whisper heads up to a friend in a navy blazer, and he had said, "If anything ever happens out here that does not feel right, you can come find me. Any floor, any time. You will not be in trouble for asking." The new associate had said, "Thank you, sir." Terrance had said, "Just Terrance." He had not told anyone about the letter. He did not think he ever would. Some things you wrote down because the writing itself was the action. The rest was someone else's to do. Joaquin Reyes was head of lighting on 3 concurrent productions. He had hired 6 new technicians, most of them from trade schools in East Los Angeles and Long Beach. One of those hires was a former Arch Rey staff member who had left the company 2 years earlier under one of the complaints that had been closed without investigation. Marisol Tremaine had transferred from his community college in San Bernardino to a 4-year university in San Diego on a Beacon Initiative grant. The day his acceptance letter came, he had called Marisol and told her he was going to dedicate his thesis to her. She had told him he was going to do no such thing, because the thesis was about his work. They had both known what they meant. Marisol Tremaine still lived in the 1-bedroom apartment in Echo Park. She had been offered a chance to move closer to the studio. She had thanked the production manager and asked for a few weeks. At the end of those weeks, she had decided to stay. She liked the morning light through the kitchen window. She liked the bookshelf where the leather notebook now sat closed, beside 3 drafts of the screenplay and a framed photograph of her mother, She had hung above the table during the second month of pre-production. The screenplay had moved into pre-production, into the early stages of a short pilot version, 20 minutes of finished footage. On the evening of the private screening, the small theater on the second floor filled. The lights came down. The 20 minutes rolled. When the lights came up, there was, for several long seconds, no sound at all. Then the applause began. Not polite applause, not industry applause. The slow, steady, unstoppable applause of people who had just seen something true. It lasted for nearly 3 minutes. Marisol stood at the back wall with her hands pressed against her cheeks. She had failed 20 seconds into the screening. When the applause faded and people began to file out, she scanned the room for the one person she most wanted to find. He was not there. She walked out alone. At the far end of the hallway, near a tall window that looked out over Wilshire Boulevard, she saw him. Keanu Reeves was sitting on a long wooden bench beside the window. He held a paper cup of coffee in both hands. His canvas jacket was folded on the bench beside him. His small backpack sat at his feet. She walked toward him. Halfway down the hallway, she slowed. He looked up as she approached and made room on the bench beside him. Without speaking, she sat. They sat in silence for nearly a minute. "Why did you come to the coffee shop that morning?" Marisol asked finally. "Why didn't you just tell me, right away, who you were?" He thought about it. He took a small sip of his coffee. "Because if you want to know who a person really is, you have to meet them when they don't know who you are." She nodded slowly. "I wanted to meet the woman who wrote those pages, not the production assistant who worked in the building my company had just invested in. Those are two very different people." She looked down at her hands. "Do you know," she said, "that if you hadn't walked through those doors that morning, I was going to quit this week? I had the letter written. It's in a drawer at home." He looked at her. "I was going to send the notebook to a reporter. I had her name on a piece of paper. I had been carrying it in my wallet for 4 months." He did not interrupt. He waited. "I didn't think anyone was going to listen. I had stopped believing they would." He nodded. "Then I'm glad we both walked through doors that morning," he said quietly. "You into yours, me into mine." She let out a small, surprised laugh. It was the first laugh she had made in the building in a long time that it had nothing to do with politeness. When she stood up to leave, he stood with her. "Marisol, one small piece of advice, if you'll let me give it. Yes, don't let that notebook get cold. Keep writing. Not because of what happened, because of what is still worth telling." She looked at him for a long second, then she nodded. "I will." She walked down the hallway, toward the elevators, toward the lobby, toward Wilshire Boulevard and the bus that would take her back to Echo Park. He stood at the window for a moment longer. Then he picked up his backpack, slung it over one shoulder, and went the other way, toward a side door that opened onto a quieter street. He took the stairs. A year later, on a Monday morning, a delivery driver came into the lobby of Arch Rey Productions with a rolled-up set of blueprints and a wet jacket. It had been raining since 6. Dalton Crowley met him at the door, took the blueprints under the awning so they would not get any wetter, walked the driver to the side of the desk, and handed him a paper cup of water from the small dispenser. The driver thanked him. He drank the water in 2 swallows. He went back out into the rain. Behind the front desk, the young woman who had once been new had just hung up the phone. She was logging the delivery into the visitor system. Above her, the famous chandelier turned its slow circles of light across the marble. There were lilies in the tall vase. There were always lilies. Nobody important walked through the door that morning. That was the change.